against walls and causing trouble and so forth. But now the British Army has decided to pull out of Philadelphia, and everybody's getting ready to go. So William goes out the night before they depart with his friends, and planning to basically get drunk and drown his sorrows, at least for the night and all that. So he ends up in a brothel where he's just planning to sit and watch, essentially wait for his friends. But he sees a dragoon essentially menacing a young prostitute with things he intends to do to her once he's paid for her. Whereupon William, moved by absolute idiocy, gets up and whips off his silver gorget. He doesn't have any money, his orderly has run off with it, but he whips off his silver officer's gorget, which he ought not to be seen without, and gives it to the madam of the brothel and says, I'll take her for the night, to save her from this other guy. And so they go upstairs together, and she's more or less getting ready to undress, and he said, no, he's met this girl before, and they had a disastrous encounter for one reason and another. And he said, no, I don't want to sleep with you. She said, you don't. And he says, no. He said, I propose to give you what my stepfather said is the greatest gift a man can give a whore, a good night's sleep. He's extremely drunk at this point, and he's swaying back and forth and giving him the fisheye. But anyway, he sits down in a chair and stretches out his booted feet and prepares to spend the night. And there was silence for a minute, and she made up her mind. There was nothing tentative about the young woman, though, and when she did reply, it was without reluctance. My name is Jane. Oh, just the one thing more. My coat, which he'd left on the previous occasion, I sold it. Oh, good night then. There was a prolonged moment filled with the unspoken thoughts of two people, then a deep, exasperated sigh. Come and get into bed, you idiot. He couldn't get into bed in full uniform. He did keep his shirt on, with some idea of preserving her modesty and his original intent. He lay quite rigid beside her, trying to envision himself as the tomb figure of a crusader, a marble monument to noble behavior, sworn to a chastity enforced by his stone embodiment. Unfortunately, it was a rather small bed, and William was rather large, and Arabella Jane wasn't trying at all to avoid touching him. Granted, she wasn't trying to arouse him either, but her mere presence did that without half trying. He was intensely aware of every inch of his body and which of them were in contact with hers. He could smell her hair, a faint scent of soap mingled with the sweetness of tobacco smoke. Her breath was sweet too, with the smell of burnt rum, and he wanted to taste it in her mouth, share the lingering stickiness of brandy with her. He closed his eyes and swallowed. Only the fact that he needed desperately to pee made it possible to keep his hands off her. He was in that state of drunkenness where he could perceive a problem, but could not analyze a solution to it, and sheer inability to think of two things at once prevented him either speaking to her or laying a hand on hers. What's the matter? She whispered hoarsely. You're wiggling like you've got tadpoles in your drawers. Well, you haven't any drawers on, have you? She giggled, and her breath tickled his ear. He groaned softly. Here now. Her voice took on a tone of alarm, and she sat up in bed, twisting around to look at him. You're not going to be sick in my bed. Get up right this minute. She pushed at him with small, urgent hands, and he stumbled out of bed, swaying and clutching at furniture to keep from falling. The window gaped before him, open to the night, a lovely sickle moon pale above. Taking this as the celestial invitation it surely was, he raised his shirt, gripped the window frame, and pissed into the night in a majestically arching rush of blinding bliss. The sense of relief was so intense that he noticed nothing whatever in its wake until Arabella Jane seized him by the arm and pulled him away from the window. Get out of sight, for God's sake. She risked a hasty glance downward, then dodged back, shaking her head. Oh well, it's not as though Captain Harkness was ever going to propose you for membership in his favorite club, is it? Harkness? William swayed toward the window, blinking. There was a remarkable amount of shouting and abuse coming from below, but he was having trouble in focusing his eyes and perceived nothing save the flicker of red uniforms, redder still in the light from the lantern over the establishment's door. Never mind, I'll likely think I did it, Arabella Jane said, a dark note in her voice. You're a girl, William pointed out logically. You couldn't piss out a window. Not without making a prime spectacle of myself, no, she agreed. But 'tisn't unknown for a whore to throw the contents of her chamber pot out on someone, accidental on purpose. Well, she shrugged, went behind the screen, and emerged with the aforementioned receptacle, which she promptly upended out of the open window. In response to renewed howls from below, she leaned out and shrieked several insults that a regimental sergeant would have been proud to author, before ducking back in and banging the shutters closed. May as well be hanged or buggered, for a sheep is a lamb, she remarked, taking him by the arm again. Come back to bed. It's only in Scotland that they bugger sheep, William said, immediately following her. And maybe part of Yorkshire. Northumbria too, maybe. Oh, really? Is Captain Harkness from one of those places then? Oh, him. William sat down on the bed rather suddenly as the room had begun to revolve in a stately manner around him. No, I'd say maybe Devon, from his speech, he concluded, pleased to have found the word. So they've got sheep in Devon too then, I suppose. Arabella Jane was unbuttoning his shirt. He raised a hand to stop her, wondered why he should, and left the hand hanging in midair. A lot of sheep, he said. A lot of sheep everywhere in England. God save the Queen then, she murmured. Intent on her work. The last button came free, and a faint draught of air stirred the hairs on William's chest. He remembered then why he should have been stopping her, but she put her head inside the open front of his shirt and licked his nipple before he could make his arrested hand complete its motion, and when he did, it merely settled gently on her head, which was surprisingly warm. So was her breath. So was her hand, which had wrapped itself round his prick in a possessive sort of way. No, he said, after what seemed a very long time, but could have been no more than seconds. His hand descended and closed, regretfully, over hers where it grasped him. I meant it. I won't bother you. She didn't let go, but did emerge for air, sitting up and regarding him with an air of puzzled impatience, just visible in the lantern light that seeped through the shutters. If you bother me, I'll tell you to stop. How's that? She offered. No, he repeated. He was concentrating fiercely now. It seemed exceedingly important that she understand. Honor. It's my honor. She made a small sound that might have been impatience or amusement. Maybe you should have considered your honor before you came to a whorehouse. Or did someone drag you inside against your will? I came with a friend, he said with dignity. She still hadn't let go, but couldn't move her hand, not with his clasped tightly round it. That's not what I mean. I mean, the words that had come easily a moment before it slipped away again, leaving him blank. You can tell me later, once you've had a good think, she suggested, and he was startled to discover that she had two hands and knew what to do with the other one, too. Unhand my... Damn, what was the bloody word? Unhand my testicles, if you please, madam. Just as you like, she replied crisply, and doing so, put her head back inside his damp, smelly shirt, seized one nipple between her teeth, and sucked so hard that it pulled every last word out of his head. Matters thereafter were unsettled, but largely pleasant, though at one point he found himself rearing above her, sweat dripping from his face onto her breasts, muttering, I'm a bastard, I'm a bastard, I'm a bastard, don't you understand? She didn't reply to this, but stretched up a long white arm, cupped her hand round the back of his head, and pulled him down again. That's why. He came gradually to himself, suddenly aware that he was talking, and evidently had been for some time, in spite of his head being cradled in the curve of her shoulder, his senses aswim in her musk, like a sweating flower, he thought dreamily, and her nipple a dark sweet thing an inch or two from his nose. The only honor I have left is my word. Have to keep it. Then tears came suddenly to his eyes with recollection of the moments just past. Why did you make me break my word? She didn't answer for some time, and he would have thought she'd fallen asleep, save for the hand that roved over his bare back, gentle as a whisper. Ever think maybe a whore has a sense of honor too, she said at last. Frankly, he hadn't, and had opened his mouth to say so, but once more his words had gone missing. He closed his eyes and fell asleep on her breast.